There comes a time in history when a question echoes across borders not from a place of doubt, but from a place of wonder. And today, that question is being asked by one of the world's most powerful nations. How did India do this? A country once written off as too chaotic, too poor, too divided, is now being studied, admired, even praised, for what can only be called a quiet revolution. India's journey has never been about shortcuts or sudden success. It's a story stitched together with struggle, patience, and an unwavering spirit. From the very beginning, she was told that her dreams were too big for her reality, that a country with so much poverty, so many people, and so many problems could never truly rise. But what they didn't understand is that greatness is not born in comfort. It grows in discomfort. It grows when you don't have everything, and yet you decide to give everything you've got. When the world saw scarcity, India saw seeds, seeds of strength, innovation, and community. There were days when the world turned its back, offering no support, no encouragement, no open doors. But that's when something incredible happened. India stopped waiting to be invited. She started building her own way forward, not with everything she needed, but with everything she had. She took the pain of being underestimated and turned it into fuel. She turned limitation into creativity. Every challenge became a stepping stone, every setback a setup for a greater leap. She didn't demand perfection from herself. She simply showed up again and again with resilience in her eyes and fire in her soul. Progress didn't arrive wrapped in celebration. It came hidden in quiet moments. The girl in the village who refused to drop out of school. The young mind in a small town who dreamed of satellites. The family that kept believing in tomorrow even when today was hard. These small moments of faith, multiplied across millions, became the foundation of something extraordinary. And while the world looked elsewhere, India kept rising, not because it was easy, but because giving up was never an option. She learned how to stretch limited resources to create extraordinary impact. She learned how to grow without losing her roots. And most of all, she learned how to turn scars into stories that inspire. Her journey from scarcity to sovereignty is not just about economics or politics. It's emotional, it's spiritual, it's deeply personal, because it reflects something in all of us, the part that refuses to quit, the part that dares to believe that where we are right now does not define where we're going. India didn't rise by comparing herself to the rest of the world. She rose by becoming more of herself. She embraced her complexity, her diversity, her contradictions. She understood that the path to success was not to copy someone else's blueprint, but to create one that only she could walk. The world now looks at India and sees power, progress, and potential, but behind that image is a journey marked by sacrifice and silent strength. The kind of strength that doesn't scream, but still moves mountains. The kind of strength that grows not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. So, when people ask, how did India do this? The answer isn't found in statistics or headlines. It's found in the hearts of her people, in the dreams they refused to give up on, in the quiet courage they carried through decades of uncertainty. It's found in the truth that even when you have nothing, you still have the power to rise, because rising isn't about what you have. It's about who you decide to become. And India decided, even when no one believed in her, that she would rise anyway. Pain is not something that only wounds. Sometimes it becomes the very force that molds us into something unshakable. For India, pain was not a stranger. It visited often, uninvited and relentless, through colonization, division, famine, injustice, and political unrest. Yet through every chapter of hardship, India discovered something precious. That pain, when faced instead of feared, has the power to awaken purpose. There were moments in her story that could have broken her completely. the kind of pain that leaves nations paralyzed, the kind that causes people to forget who they are. But in the stillness of despair, India did something extraordinary. She didn't turn away. She didn't bury the pain. She sat with it. She listened to it. And then she began to rise, not in rage, not in retaliation, but in quiet, unwavering resilience. Pain has a way of becoming a mirror. It shows you what you value. It reveals what you're made of. And for India, it became the foundation of something deeply purposeful. Every struggle she endured became a reason to build something better. Every wound became a roadmap, not just for survival, but for reinvention. She didn't rush her healing. She allowed herself to stumble. She took time to rebuild. And while the world moved on quickly, India stood still long enough to understand that progress rooted in pain becomes powerful because it's real. It's not performance, it's transformation. And just like individuals who rise from trauma with a renewed sense of meaning, India began to carry her history not as a burden, but as a badge of wisdom. She started turning the pain of the past into the vision for her future. She poured it into her people, into her policies, into her dreams. The same soil that once soaked in sorrow became the soil from which brilliance bloomed. This kind of transformation isn't loud. It doesn't make headlines in the moment. But over time, it becomes undeniable. Because what is born through pain often carries a depth that cannot be taught. It comes from living through the fire and walking out of it with softer eyes, stronger steps, and a soul that refuses to give in. India didn't just learn to endure. She learned to create through adversity. She made art in the midst of chaos. She birthed science in the shadow of scarcity. She taught her children to believe in something better, even when life told them otherwise. That belief, that unshakable purpose born out of pain, is the reason the world watches her now with curiosity and awe. It's easy to admire the success, but what the world is truly feeling when they look at India is the impact of her emotional endurance. The invisible kind of power, the one that comes from having faced the worst and choosing every day to move forward with hope. That's what makes her rise so profound. Because when you turn your pain into purpose, you no longer move out of fear. You move from conviction. You move from clarity. You become unstoppable, not because you're untouched by struggle, but because you've been through it and chose to shine anyway. That's how India did it. She didn't escape the pain, she transformed it. She turned her past into a path. And now, the very world that once looked down upon her looks up and wonders, how did she carry all that and still rise? The answer lies not in what she endured, but in what she chose to become because of it. When the world thinks of innovation, they often imagine glossy labs, endless resources, and ideal conditions. But India rewrote that idea entirely. She did not wait for perfection to arrive. She didn't pause and wish for more favorable circumstances. She built in the middle of limitation. She invented under pressure, and that is where her genius revealed itself. Not in luxury, but in necessity. There is something deeply powerful about a mind that has to make the most of what little it has. And in India, those minds were everywhere. In small towns, in dusty classrooms, in narrow alleyways, in places the world didn't think to look. People who were told you don't have enough quietly replied, "Then we'll create what we need." That's how innovation was born, not from abundance, but from courage. India looked around at all that was lacking, technology, infrastructure, support systems, and decided that scarcity would not be the full stop in her sentence. It would be the beginning of a new paragraph. While others waited for resources, she trained herself to maximize the few she had. She made science affordable. She made healthcare accessible. She brought digital transformation not just to cities, but to villages. She proved that when innovation meets intention, even the impossible becomes possible, and all of it was done while carrying the weight of expectation and skepticism. The world did not expect India to lead, they expected her to follow, but when you are used to being overlooked, you learn how to surprise. You learn how to rise quietly, without needing anyone's permission. One of the most remarkable things about India's journey is how she never stopped experimenting. Failure didn't scare her, it taught her. She understood that setbacks weren't the end, they were feedback. And so she kept moving forward, again and again, even when the outcomes weren't certain. That's the kind of innovation that doesn't just change systems. It changes people. It changes how a nation sees itself, because something shifts when you realize you can solve your own problems. You begin to believe that you don't need to rely on external validation. You become your own source of power. And that's exactly what happened. India became her own proof that progress is possible. Children in villages began to dream of engineering and space science, not as fantasies, but as goals within reach. Women stepped into roles once thought unimaginable, not because they were invited, but because they created their place. Startups emerged from garages. Solutions were built for the many, not just the few. All of this in a country that once fought simply to survive. It is easy to be innovative when the path is clear. It is far more powerful to innovate when the path does not even exist yet. India did not wait for that path to be paved. She carved it herself. Every app developed, every policy reformed, every rural connection established. These were acts of courage, not just cleverness. And now, when the world pauses and says, "How did she do it?" the answer lies in this quiet truth. She refused to be defined by what she lacked. She chose to be remembered for what she created. Innovation was never just a strategy for India. It was survival. And through that survival, she created a future that even the most powerful now admire. There are few things in the world as complex as India, and yet within that very complexity lies her greatest strength. A land of more than 1 billion hearts, thousands of dialects and countless traditions, and still she breathes as one. It's easy to look from the outside and see disarray. Different cultures, different colors, different customs. But India never tried to erase her differences to find unity. Instead, she embraced every one of them. That is not chaos, that is courage, because real unity is not about sameness. It's about choosing respect over rivalry, harmony over ego. In India, every street tells a different story. One might echo with temple bells, while another hums with prayer calls. One dish may burn with spice, while another soothes with sweetness. One festival throws colors in the sky, while another lights candles in silence. And all of it exists side by side, not in competition, but in celebration. India's unity is not neat. It is not tidy or predictable. It is emotional, raw, and constantly evolving. But that's what makes it real. This country did not try to force itself into a single mold. She learned to hold contradictions in the same breath, to be both ancient and modern, spiritual and scientific, traditional and progressive. That balance isn't easy. It's earned through empathy, through listening, through learning how to live with people who do not speak like you, dress like you, or worship like you, and loving them anyway. This wasn't always easy. There were times the differences felt like they would tear the country apart. Times when fear tried to divide and tension tried to silence the song of togetherness. But India always found her way back. Because beneath the layers of language, belief, and identity, there is something shared, an emotional thread that binds every Indian to one another. A feeling of belonging, of being part of something greater than oneself. The world often wonders how such diversity can even function within a single nation. But perhaps the better question is, how could it not? Because when you grow up seeing so many versions of humanity around you, you learn acceptance without even realizing it. You learn that truth can have more than one voice, and beauty can wear many forms. And in that understanding, a powerful kind of unity is born. Not one that erases differences, but one that honors them. This unity has not only been a cultural strength, but a foundation for growth. Innovation came from different minds shaped by different worlds. Policies were inspired by voices from every corner. Solutions were not copied. They were created to fit the unique and diverse needs of a vast population. This inclusion made India not just a democracy, but a living, breathing dialogue, and now the world sees it. The way this country moves forward with so many hands, yet somehow one heartbeat. The way it faces conflict, not by turning away, but by turning inward, asking not how to be more like others, but how to be more like itself. And in doing so, India discovered that her identity was never a single story. It was a million stories, each holding space for the other. So when people ask, how did India do this? The answer is found in every shared meal between strangers, every song sung in different tongues, every moment when love won over fear. She did it by being all of herself without apology. She did it by choosing unity, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. And in a world breaking apart over difference, India stands tall, not in spite of her diversity, but because of it. Every great success carries with it a story the world rarely sees. It's easy to admire the spotlight, to clap for the trophies and headlines. But behind every loud achievement, there are silent battles. Battles fought in loneliness, in uncertainty, in the exhausting moments when no one is watching and giving up seems like the easier choice. This is the part of India's journey that the world forgets to mention, the silent struggles, the invisible labor, the patience it took to turn whispers of hope into waves of progress. For decades, India was not celebrated. She was criticized, questioned, underestimated. Progress was not linear, it was messy. It came in small, stubborn steps. It came in the form of people refusing to quit, even when nothing around them was working. It came in classrooms with no chairs, in hospitals short on beds, in villages with more dreams than roads, and yet people kept showing up. Not because it was easy, but because they believed it mattered. That is the kind of resilience the world doesn't always recognize. The kind that doesn't shout or demand attention. It just keeps going, quietly, faithfully, through failures, delays, disappointments, and detours. Behind every technological breakthrough was a team that worked through the night, often with limited resources and even more limited belief from those around them. Behind every economic leap was a generation of workers who never asked for applause, only opportunity. Behind every policy that made a difference were years of pushback, revisions, resistance, and still persistence. India's success didn't come wrapped in luxury. It came wrapped in sacrifice, in fathers who skipped meals so their daughters could study, in women who broke barriers not for themselves, but so those who came after them would find the door a little easier to open, in youth who left their homes to build futures in cities they had never seen, fueled by nothing more than determination and the hope of something better. And through it all, no one really noticed. The world looked away during the struggle, but turned around to applaud the results. That is often how it goes, but India didn't rise for validation. She rose because there was something within her people that refused to stay down. A quiet fire, a deep knowing that even if the world could not see their worth yet, they would still rise, and one day the world would have to take notice. Now they see the headlines, the numbers, the growth, the power. But what they're actually witnessing is the result of generations who endured without recognition, who built without praise, who chose hope over cynicism and progress over pain. And that is something you cannot measure in statistics. That is something that lives in the soul of a nation. It's easy to admire what India has become, but it takes empathy to understand what it took to get here. Every loud success stands on a mountain of quiet struggle, and that is the real story. That's the story that matters. Because it reminds us that we don't need everyone to believe in us. We just need to believe in ourselves, even in the silence. Especially in the silence. India did not arrive in the light without learning how to walk through the dark. And now that the world is finally watching, she doesn't need to explain how she got here, because the answer isn't in her words. It's in her journey, and that journey was built not on moments of celebration, but on the strength to keep going when there was none. Sometimes the loudest thing you'll ever hear is doubt, not from the world outside, but from the voice within. That quiet question in the back of your mind whispering, "What if I'm not enough?" India has heard that voice many times. She has faced ridicule, suspicion, mockery, not just from the world, but from within her own borders. There were voices that said she couldn't grow without copying others, that she wasn't ready, that she wasn't built for greatness. But she did something that very few dare to do. She didn't fight the noise. She chose to rise above it. It's never easy to overcome external judgment, especially when it echoes your own internal fears. India did not pretend to have it all figured out. She did not wear confidence like armor. She wore vulnerability. She accepted her imperfections. She embraced the mess. And then, step by step, she began to move forward, slowly, boldly, not waiting for approval, not chasing validation, just walking toward a future she could see even when others couldn't. What most people never talk about is how exhausting it is to try and prove yourself, to constantly carry the weight of being misunderstood, to live with the pressure of expectation while also battling your own insecurities. But India discovered a quiet truth that greatness doesn't require shouting. It requires showing up, even on the days you feel invisible. Even when no one claps, even when the mirror doesn't reflect what you hope to see, the power of overcoming negative voices, internal and external, is not about silencing them completely. It's about learning to keep walking even while they speak. It's about hearing doubt and choosing not to be defined by it. It's about understanding that belief in yourself is not a sudden lightning bolt. It's a daily decision. India made that decision over and over again. She didn't wait until everything was perfect. She didn't wait until every critic turned into a supporter. She just kept building. She focused on the work, on the process, on the people, and little by little the noise began to fade. Not because it stopped, but because it no longer mattered. What mattered more was the quiet strength she had discovered, the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself, but simply continues persistently, passionately, without pause. There is something deeply human about India's rise, something that reflects all of us, because haven't we all felt that doubt? Haven't we all been told, in one way or another, you can't, and yet here we are still trying, still showing up, still daring to believe that we can become something more than what the world expected. India's story is proof that overcoming negativity is not about erasing it. It's about refusing to be reduced by it. It's about standing in your truth, even when it shakes. It's about being your own source of strength when the world gives you none. And that is why her journey is so inspiring, because it's not a fairy tale, it's real, raw, relatable. Now, as people across oceans look at her with admiration and curiosity, she no longer needs to explain how she did it. Because the answer is not in a statistic or a speech. It's in the silent decisions made every day to keep going, even when doubt shouted the loudest. And that is something every human being can relate to, because the most powerful rise does not begin with confidence. It begins with the courage to keep moving, even when you don't yet believe in your own wings. And so, here we are, standing at the end of a story, yet also at the beginning of something far more meaningful. We've talked about a nation that rose not because the world handed her the tools, but because she found strength in her scars, purpose in her pain, and unity in her diversity. India did not follow a straight line. She stumbled, she struggled, she sacrificed, and still she soared. What you see today is not just the success of a country. It is the triumph of the human spirit. It is the proof that limitations can give birth to innovation, that heartbreak can awaken hope, and that a billion voices can still speak with one heart when they choose courage over fear. India's journey reminds us that you do not need to have it all to begin. You just need the will to rise when everything is pushing you down. She didn't become a global inspiration by being perfect. She became it by being persistent, by choosing to keep walking even when the road wasn't clear, even when the noise was loud, even when no one believed. And now the world is asking how she did it, but maybe the question is not just for her, maybe it's for us. Maybe it's asking, how will you rise? How will you respond when the world underestimates you, when the noise grows louder than your confidence? Will you wait for the light, or will you become it? Because what India teaches us is not just about nations. It's about people, people like you and me who are faced with doubt, brokenness, and challenges, and still choose to stand, still choose to build, still choose to believe in something greater than their circumstances. So yes, even America is asking how India did this. And now we know she didn't wait, she didn't explain, she didn't apologize. She simply did what those born to rise always do. She trusted the quiet power within her, and she let it lead the way. And now it's your turn.